Hey everyone. Today's session is going to be a little bit different than what we've done so far. I know we've been providing you with a lot of exercises and certain classes that you can flow along with or follow along with, but today is going to be more of an educational thing. In the time we've been spent thinking about what sort of new topics we can provide for our audience here, the one thing that keeps coming to mind is something I've run into quite often with our amputee population when they come to therapy. So I was wondering, what sort of information can we get out on our platform so that everyone knows what are the big key things they need to think about when they're home with a new amputation. You've kind of done the medical part of things, home, been discharged from the hospital, and are kind of in that time period. Maybe you haven't got a prosthetic limb yet, or you're waiting to get fitted, but you're in that window where you're not really doing much yet. It's kind of a waiting game. Um, and you're about to go to therapy, or maybe you've just gotten your limb and not wearing a lot of hours yet. The time is spent much more seated than up and walking around. And so, again, we're kind of in that waiting window of time until you're doing more hours up in your prosthetic leg. So I've run into a lot of issues with my folks during that window of time that I want to address. There's 4 key things that it comes to being really important when you're spending a lot of time at home, maybe doing some therapy, maybe not so much yet, but there's a lot of time spent at home. What we see is that people are seated. If you have had a lower extremity amputation, it's obviously not easy to stand. You don't have the limb that you had prior to this, and maybe you're deconditioned and weak, and all these other things are going on. So people spend a lot of time sitting. We've got some big issues that come with regaining the ability to walk, which ends up being everyone's biggest goal from all this time spent sitting. So the first thing I want to talk about is range of motion and flexibility. If you are home and dealing with a new limb loss and you can stand up, so standing up with a walker, standing up, in the bathroom holding onto the sink, anytime you can spend upright is really, really wonderful for your flexibility. When we sit, our hips are kind of at a 90-degree angle, our knees are at a 90-degree angle. What can happen is the range of motion in those joints gets really tight. And when we stand, we are not in that 90-degree angle. Everything's nice and straight and flat. And so in order to maintain the flexibility of those joints, the best thing to do is something very functional, which is being upright. If you cannot be upright, that's okay. Laying flat can be just as helpful. So being flat on your back, and don't have your knees bent, because that gives you that same angle at the hips, which will make the hips tight. But laying flat is very, very beneficial. Or if you're sitting and you've had an amputation below the knee, making sure that you keep your knee out nice and straight. So we spend a lot of time bent when we're seated. And the big key thing to remember is to try to be able to get flat and straight. Because when we stand, we need the hips to be extended and the knees to be extended. Everything has to be in a nice straight line when we stand up. So that's going to make your return to walking a whole lot easier if your flexibility and your range of motion is maintained. The other thing, number 2, is strength. So when, again, a lot of time spent seated or in a hospital bed, or all the things that come with, such a big medical issue as losing a limb, as there's a lot of strength loss. Unfortunately, being seated or laying down kind of facilitates that further. So as you're allowed by your doctor, and safety-wise, again, getting up and moving around as much as you can is really beneficial. So if you have the strength to hop with a walker or whatever sort of assistive device you've been recommended to use, it's absolutely exhausting, but doing that some of the day is going to help build up your endurance, both of your intact limb and your upper body and your cardiovascular system. All of that's going to be necessary to return to walking. So doing some of those things safely at home while you're in that interim waiting period really makes the transition back to walking so much easier, because that's one less hurdle that you have to negotiate. So again, getting up is very, very key. If that's not possible, that's okay. Reaching out to a home therapist, if you've had a home health therapist, or someone that can give you some exercises that you can do laying down or seated, can be really helpful as well to at least prevent that decline that comes with being a bit more sedentary. Number 3, stand. I've mentioned it already in the last 2 things. If your ultimate goal is to be standing and walking again, the sooner you are up standing, the sooner you can get to those things. This uses the muscles that you need to use when you walk and when you stand, if that's your ultimate goal. So the time spent seated, we don't use our hip muscles when we're sitting. We actually don't use a lot of our trunk muscles when we're sitting as well, if we're supported and propped up. And those muscles are really, really important when it comes to walking. There's enough hurdles that come with return to walking with a new prosthetic that, not having to deal with the weakness, the range of motion loss, and the inability to be upright standing, cutting that off of your list is one less hurdle to jump. Number 4, the last big thing is skincare. Regardless of what made you lose your limb or how you lost your limb, maintaining really good care of the skin at the end of your residual limb is really, really key to being up and getting back to walking sooner. Your team, including your physician and the prosthetist and hopefully a physical therapist, are not going to allow you to be up and walking on skin that is of poor quality, because once you have some skin breakdown, you're going to be required to go back to sitting again. So taking really, really good care of that skin. It seems like something that is kind of an afterthought, or, I'll kind of keep an eye on it. It's numero uno in the priority list, because as soon as there's a skin issue, they're going to have you sit down, take that new prosthetic off, and spend some time getting the skin taken care of. So it's really, really key to making the process go as smoothly as possible. So again, all of these things are supplemental to what your team is telling you to do, but from what I've seen as a physical therapist who works with the amputee population, paying attention to your flexibility and not losing some of that motion by being sedentary or spending too much time sitting. So standing up, laying flat, stretching your legs out nice and straight a good portion of the day is really key. 2, focusing on your strength, making sure you're getting up and moving around. If standing and walking is your goal, try to be up, standing, and hopping, or just being upright as much as possible, so that will facilitate that sooner. And pay attention to your skincare. All right. It was nice chatting with everyone today. I hope these little tidbits are helpful. And thanks for visiting our site.